it's Christina Zachary back to y'all. Another month has passed and we are here with Home Sweet Home San Antonio. I'm Christina Zachary, like I said, and I'm a realtor here in San Antonio. My husband and I created this podcast. We want to show y'all really cool businesses in and around San Antonio and just really show y'all how San Antonio is thriving and surviving in these crazy times. So I'm here today with Louis Barrios. He is the president and CEO of Los Barrios restaurant. And I'm super excited to have him today because he is our first guest who owns a restaurant business. And I've been chasing people down to just get someone in the restaurant industry. So I'm so glad he's here today. Hi, Louis. How you doing?
Hi, Christina. I'm doing fine. Thank you for the invitation.
Of course. Well, I'm super excited to have you today. I love your personality already. So if you can, say hello to the YouTube world and everybody listening and kind of tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everybody. I'm Louis Barrios. My family's been in the restaurant business 52 years. I was 11 or 12 years old when my mom got her first restaurant. It was my mother's dream to have a restaurant, and my father, who was in Spanish radio, TV, and newspaper, made that dream come true. So he bought her a restaurant. I was 12 years old. Diana, my sister, was 9, and my older sister, Teresa, was 14 years old. So Teresita was a prep cook, I was a dishwasher, and Diana was the cute one. So she was the server and the hostess. And so that's when we started in the restaurant business. And then 3 years later, our father gets killed by a drunk driver, and it ends up being our livelihood. We lose our father, we lose 95% of our income, and my mother was widowed at 44. My dad was 46 when he died. So she sells that restaurant a couple years later, and she gets cheated in 2 ventures after my father's death. She tries to pass her real estate test. The test was in English, the class was in Spanish. She didn't pass the test. And so she realized she had to go back into the restaurant business. So one of the partners that she had been cheated with on a previous venture, they started Los Barrios with $3,000 in an old boat garage. And that's when my mother started on a 30-year trek of working 7 days a week till midnight, till the day she died. Now, Los Barrios has come out on Good Morning America with Emerald, Good Morning America with Sam Champion, the Today Show in New York twice, the Food Network about, 800 or 900 times on 10 shows that have aired several times, many times. The Travel Channel, Golf Channel, NPR, PBS, Despierta America, Telemundo International, the BBC. We cook for the President of the United States out of the White House kitchen, 1,500 puffy tacos at the Congressional Picnic, and on and on and on. And what I like to tell people is all that happened yesterday. What we did yesterday bought us today, and what we do today will buy us tomorrow. So every day we pour ourselves. We're vulnerable with our customers. We serve them with all our hearts, and we hope to win your business for the rest of your life generationally.
Wow. That is the best intro we've ever had, Louis. Thank you so much. You can really tell you have a lot of emotion and a lot of just your whole energy and your whole soul into this business. So it must be really cool to kind of have taken over the family business aspect. What has that been like from you switching from the kind of that role kind of in maybe you're a supportive role going into a leadership role? How has that changed for you? Has it made things better, difficult? How does that work?
Well, my mother didn't want us going to the restaurant business because it's very consuming, it's very hard. So when I graduated from St. Mary's, I went to work for Johnson & Johnson. I was a hospital rep for 3 years, covering South Texas, Laredo, the Valley, the Rio Grande Valley, Corpus Christi, and parts of San Antonio. At the same time, I had a roommate, which was my little sister Diana's boyfriend at the time. His name was David. And he came to me one time and he said, Louis, it's none of my business, but your mother works 7 days a week till midnight. And I'm there with your sister at night, just kind of hanging out when your mom gets home or close to midnight. And she walks in and she has her bags and she walks in and she greets us very kindly and very beautifully, but you can tell that she's literally exhausted. And then she goes back to her room and we don't see her anymore. And then on the weekends, I'm there with your sister as she to work alongside of her, to spend time with her. And I see how she's mistreated by different employees, and people talk mean to her and they take advantage of her. And it's none of my business, But in my opinion, if you want to see your mom around, if your mom lasts 5 years, I'll be surprised. So I don't know why I'm telling you this. It's none of my business. But if it were my mother, I would want somebody to tell me. And so, like I said, I'm not telling you what to do. You do whatever you think is best. And so it was at that time that I decided to leave Johnson & Johnson and go back to the family business and start working. So my mom worked 7 days a week, so I worked 7 days a week. So I got Tuesday nights off. I worked 7 lunches per week and 6 nights per week. And I didn't realize it at the time, but I was in my mid-20s, and I didn't have a social life anymore. I was working every day. And so when I would lock the door at 11:30 p.m., my buddies that had gone to medical school and law school and engineering school, they were at home asleep so they could wake up at 6 in the morning and go to work. Well, the buddies I ended up hanging around with were the ones that were out partying, because I'd get off of work close to midnight. And so my alcohol abuse got worse, and I started, drug abuse, and just I went the wrong way, and I was working 7 days a week, and my addiction got worse and worse and worse. I was working 7 days a week, but then 6 nights a week I was, going out and doing things that were not good for me physically, but all I did was work. And then when I got off of work, I just wanted to have a life again, an escape. And looking back, my mother didn't know better, because she worked 7 days a week, so I was expected to work 7 days a week. But it just kind of made my addiction that I already had. I'm an obsessive compulsive type of person already. It's full throttle or out of gas, either the windows up or the windows down. Either we're going to sweat or we're going to freeze. So it's going to be one of the two, right? And so at the time, I didn't realize in my 20s that it was not good for my mental health to be working like that. And my mother, she didn't know any better. She was working 7 days a week. She was widowed at age 44. And so it was hard on her. We lost 95% of our income. Went from being upper middle class to lower class all in one day. And we lost our father. And so it was very difficult. So, I learned a lot by building a business with my mom, but I also made a lot of mistakes that really, hurt my family and others, because, when you have these type of challenges in your life, unfortunately, you hurt a lot of people. There's a lot of collateral damage along the way. And I'm not proud of that, but I don't run away from my past.
Have you, obviously you're not 20 anymore, and time has passed. Have you it looks like you've come to like a reconciliation with it.
Yes. So I guess my father was killed by a drunk driver when I was 15. And back then, people got their driver's license at 16. And the drinking age was 18. So right when my dad dies is when all of a sudden all my friends come of age, and they're football players, and they want to go hang out. They go to the social parties, and they're drinking beer, and they're having a good time. And so right when my dad is not around and my mother's consumed by trying to provide for us, I have all this freedom, and it just is when my friends all come of age. And so I start drinking. Now, I didn't realize that they were drinking socially, and I was anesthetizing the pain. The loss of my father was so profound for me, and it's actually when I really shook a fist at God and got angry. And I was raised in a very devout Catholic household, and my mother was a very devout believer, and so I inherited that from my mother. But I didn't believe that God didn't exist. I just got angry at him. I shook a fist and said, you may be the man, but you're not my man. And you want me to go that way? I'm going the other way. And I didn't care. It didn't matter to me that I had shooken a fist at him. But that, along with then having to go back to the restaurant business after I graduated from college and worked for J&J, that it just made the addiction, accelerated the addiction. And so for 15 years, my drinking got bad until I get to the end of my rebellion, and I'm in my driveway, and I'm thinking to myself, well, I'm praying to God. I said, God, I know I'm going to die. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. I mean, I was just completely out of control. And the Lord kind of saved me from myself. I cried out for help, and he got me to a place to where I had started going to church and really delivered from all this horrible influence that was controlling me. And I turned my life around then. I mean, that's when the Lord literally turned me around. I was 3 months before I turned 30. And after that, for the next year, I kind of just read my Bible, prayed, went to church, and then I meet my wife probably about a year and a few months after that. And then my life completely turned around. I mean, there's a saying, no matter how far you go the wrong way, turn around. And that's basically what happened. The Lord turned me around. I asked for help. He stopped me, turned me around, and then I went from going full throttle the wrong way to the full throttle the right way.
That's beautiful. Very inspiring. And I know your mom passed away tragically as well, but was she able to see that turnaround and experience that turnaround?
Oh, absolutely. I was 3 months before I turned 30, and then my mother died when I was 47.
Okay.
So my mother got to see the complete turnaround, and she was, she was answered prayer. People ask me if I believe in faith-based initiatives, and I tell them I am my mother's faith-based initiative. My mother prayed me into the kingdom of heaven. She just would not give up. I was the man of the household. It was a Mexican household. I had an older sister and a younger sister, and she was the female. And my mother, I was able to eulogize her after, my mother was murdered. She was killed, and we can talk about that if you like. But when I eulogized her the 3 times from the 3 different services, one of them I said, I was born a prince, raised to be a king, crowned and robed in love. My mother poured so much love into us, and so much kindness, and so much grace, and so much mercy, and so much prayer, that she had this great expectancy. And just because my father died didn't mean that she was going to compromise her dreams for us. It was just going to be a different way to get to those dreams. But those dreams were still going to come true, even though my father wasn't around anymore. So my mother just sacrificed her life so that we could have a life.
Absolutely. So we will talk about that for a second, but are you working 7 days a week still?
There's been about 5 eras in our business that I've had to work 7 days a week, and since COVID, it's been one of those eras that I have to work 7 days a week. I don't mind. It's not work to me. It's just an expression of what I do. I love the hospitality industry. I love people. I have a passion for people. I can hardly wait to get to the next table to meet the next person and see what happens. I mean, anything can happen at tables. Like, for example, this was a few 4th of Julys ago that I'm at Viola's Ventanas, the restaurant close to SeaWorld, and there's this beautiful little family, and they have a little girl, and she's about 5 years old, cute as a button. And I'm talking to the family, and I start talking to the little girl, and I said, "Are you always this pretty, or do you practice?" And she says, "No, I don't practice, but I look in the mirror all the time." Yeah. And so the mother just died laughing. And you never know what's going to happen at a table. You're going to get these little wonderful little, these wonderful little treasures that of memories that you get to put in your treasure chest.
Absolutely.
And when things are not perfect, because you have some of those memories that aren't as good, then you can pull out this other little nugget, and you can kind of relive it. And so that's one of the nuggets I like to relive, and I tell that story to customers, and now on this podcast, right?
Well, thank you. And now the recipes.
Yes.
Where did those recipes come from? Did your mom pull them from previous family members? Was she creative and created her own? Kind of go into a little bit about that.
Okay, so it was my mother's dream to have a restaurant.
Yeah.
My father was in Spanish radio, TV, and newspaper, and they had no need for a restaurant, but it was her dream. So my dad wanted to make that dream come true, and she hears of a restaurant for sale, and he buys it for her. And then he gets killed in a traffic accident 3 years later. But that restaurant was La Palmita. Now, La Palmita came from the El Rancho family of restaurants. El Rancho had about I'm going to say 20 restaurants, and they had a commissary. And if they were still around today, they would be a Bill Miller's. And they would have their commissary, and they would have all their restaurants. Well, the family ended up breaking up for their personal reasons. I've only heard the story secondhand, so I don't want to be quoting them because I'm not sure exactly what happened. I think I know, but not enough to be broadcasting it. And so, well, the family ended up breaking up. The parents got divorced. And so one of our cooks got the privilege of working in that commissary, which very few cooks did. And so we kind of got the main recipes from the old El Rancho restaurants, which was the gravy, the pico de gallo, the carne guisada, enchiladas rancheras, enchiladas verdes, the rice, the beans. Now, my mother modified the recipes because she didn't like as much comino as they used, so she modified them. And then she brought all our family recipes. My mother was an exceptional cook, and that's why she wanted to be in the restaurant business, because she loved cooking. Now, the seed for my mother to get into the restaurant business was back in her youth. Her parents were both very ambitious people. My grandfather had, he had little cantinas, and he was a salesman, and my grandmother she could roll the cigarettes like that with very fast, and they would make little bundles, and then she would make little dresses, and she could and sew them together just like that, and just throw them in a pile. And then my grandfather would take his little vehicle, his little pickup truck, like a perichosa or whatever they called it, and he would go into the cerros of, my mother was from Bustamante, Nuevo León, outside of Monterrey, the Sierra Madre mountain range. And so the Cascade Caverns that we have here, they have the biggest in the continent there, because it's the Sierra Madre.
Yeah.
And so in those caves, there's iron ore, or there was some kind of elements there that they would mine. And so my grandfather and grandmother, they would go to these little campsites, and they would sell the cigarettes, and they would sell the dresses, and so very ambitious people. Well, my grandfather started drinking when he was 30 years old after the third child, and his drinking got worse. And so before my grandparents ended up divorcing, which was very rare back then, but my grandmother was not going to put up with my grandfather's drinking and carousing and spending all the money on your money's no good in this bar, type mentality. She's like, hey, we work real hard for our money, and you're buying everybody drinks. Well, they rented a hotel in Anahuac, and it was like a bed and breakfast, nothing sophisticated, and it had a little kitchen, a little restaurant, and so my mother got to play waitress and stuff. So that's when the seed of the restaurant business went into my mother's heart. Yeah. And it was always there, and the more she learned about cooking, so my grandparents divorced. My grandmother's got to go to Chicago from time to time to raise enough money to support her 5 daughters that were living with different aunts and godmothers, while my grandfather was, drinking too much. And so they were able, my mother missed her mother so much, and she would, try to take care of her sisters, not being in the same household. And so they reunited in Mexico for a while, and then my grandmother dies when my mother's 20. And so my mother is the second oldest of 5 girls. And then my grandfather's drinking gets worse. But either way, he still brings them to the United States, and with nothing except their name. And they started over here. And so my mother goes to work at La Prensa, which is a daily newspaper. It had the largest circulation of any newspaper in the city, including the English-speaking papers. It was number 1. My father was sports editor and director of sales there. My mother was a secretary, and my dad also had 2 radio shows on KXX radio. And so my dad was a newspaper and a radio personality. And my mother was a secretary there, and that's where they met. And they ended up getting married, And my dad wanted her to be a stay-at-home mom, so she was a stay-at-home mom, even though she had all these little micro businesses. She would do quinceañera cakes and wedding cakes, and she'd bring stuff from Mexico, jewelry and stuff, and we'd go sell them. My mom was, she was so ambitious because she had to be. When she was young, she had to make her own money, and she had to help her sisters, and so she knew how to stretch a dollar, and she knew how to make a dollar. She was a merchant, and on my dad's side, it was the radio, TV, and advertising. As a matter of fact, my father's first cousin is Lionel Sosa, who was Time Magazine top 25 most influential Latinos in the country. He worked on Reagan's campaign, both Bush campaigns, Gingrich and McCain's Hispanic outreach. So my dad's side is marketing, my mom's side was merchants, and so that's how we became what we became, because of these influences. And so that's how my mother got the seed of being in the restaurant business. That's how it started growing. And when my dad died, and he had bought her that little restaurant, and she couldn't pass her real estate test, then that was really her only option.
It's just meant to be. It's like you're not meant to pass that real estate test.
Right.
Don't go into real estate. It sucks. I'm just kidding. I love real estate.
Well, my mother wanted to do it so badly because the restaurant business was so consuming.
I know.
She worked 100 hours a week, literally, for years and years and years. I could show you her first menu that when she first started Los Barrios with $3,000, her hours of operations was 7 a.m. to 9 p.m., Monday through Thursday, 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. Fridays and Saturdays, 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. on Sundays because she went to church on Sunday mornings. This is a 48-year-old widow that had 3 children at home, and she still had to wash and do all the things she did. So my mother literally sacrificed her life so that we could have a life.
I know. Well, bunch of rich history, and it really sounds like you were very connected and you loved her very much. So I know that her death must have been very tragic for you. So tell us a little bit about what you're comfortable with that, and how y'all have embraced her soul into keeping the business going.
Okay, so my mother worked 7 days a week till 11:30 to midnight for 30 years. On April 24th of 2008, my mother goes home from work. And at 4 o'clock in the morning, the next door neighbor, Joey Estrada Jr., breaks into my mom's house at 4 o'clock in the morning. She sits up in her bed. He shoots her in the head with a bow and arrow.
Oh my gosh.
Then he goes to get her body off the bed. He pulls it and only gets the arrow shaft, not the head, not the arrowhead that was lodged in her brain. He steals her purse, her credit cards, her car. He goes to the local Valero where they have him on video, paying for gas, opening my mom's trunk, taking out a container of gas, a gallon, filling it up, puts it in my mom's trunk, drives to her house, douses the room, my mom's body, lights it, and goes on a shopping spree. And they catch him that night at midnight. And so he confessed, said he was sorry for doing what he did. He never said what he did. And later he retracts that he said that he confessed to the crime. But SAPD, they infiltrated the neighborhood. They caught him within the 24 hours.
Wow.
The next night, I went over to the Estrada's house to let him know that I had forgiven him. And they were in complete denial, which I understood completely because when my dad died, I was in denial that my father had died, even though we got the call from Welford Hall that he had been killed in a traffic accident, even though he didn't come home that night, even though my uncle identified the body. I was still in complete denial until I saw him in the casket. That's when it all went away. Well, when I went over to the Estrada's house, they were in denial that Joey had done this. They had every excuse in the book, and it was my mother's next door neighbor. So I invited them to be our guest of honor at all my mother's funeral services. And so at the actual funeral, I offered to pay for the defenses of Joey Estrada because I had had hundreds of calls from lots of people, including attorneys, and nobody wanted to take the case because we were so close with so many people here in town. It was a conflict of interest. And so at the funeral, I forgave him offered to pay for his defenses, and everybody went crazy. The media went crazy. The headline in the paper was Barrios funeral, shocking twist, spirit of forgiveness in bold prints. And people didn't understand forgiveness. Some people thought that I had hired Estrada to murder my mother. Some people thought that I wanted my mother's business, which she had already gifted to me and my two sisters. It was already ours. People didn't understand it. And with the death of my father, I was so trapped in unforgiveness with the Almighty that it led to alcohol abuse, drug abuse, sexual immorality. In Matthew chapter 18, Jesus tells Peter, if you don't forgive from your heart, then God will turn you over to the tormentors. And I was tormented after my father's death. So when I reconciled with God and I became very committed to learning the scriptures and wrestling with the scriptures, and all of a sudden I would question God about forgiveness because everything hinged on forgiveness. And it was impossible to do. I thought, well, the Lord revealed to me that forgiveness is not an emotion. You never feel like doing it. It's a decision. You just decide to do it. And once I realized that it was a decision, when Jesus said, turn the other cheek, then all of a sudden, oh, it's a decision to turn the other cheek. Well, then it was easy. And then I started practicing forgiveness. People that had embezzled, one over 150,000 from us, one over 50,000. And the list goes on. People that have hurt us, employees that we took care of that cheated us, and many things. And an ex-girlfriend that betrayed me, and just lots of things that I just had to practice forgiveness. And so first I had to realize that forgiveness was not an emotion but a decision. It was something you had to practice. Well, then I started practicing, and then comes the death of my mother, and
that's the ultimate test,
right? And so then once I had a handle on forgiveness, then the Almighty had me teach a lot of people about forgiveness. And John Quinones, ABC News, wrote us up in his book called The Heroes Among Us. And when he interviewed us, he said, I'm not surprised that y'all forgave your mother's killer, because me and my two sisters, because I know y'all, but you did it in real time. And then I had explained to him that it was through the 15 years of my rebellion, when I was unforgiving to the Almighty, that when I came to those realizations, then that's when I had to start doing it. I had the 15 years to lose, you can say, when I was 15, but when I was 47 years old and I was a father and a husband, and I had 300 plus employees, I didn't have even 5 minutes to lose, much less. I could not get back into unforgiveness and start that process again of being turned over to the tormentors. And so there was a lot of revelation that took place in those years between the death of my father and me giving my life to Christ, and then wrestling with the scriptures, learning about forgiveness, and then having this suffering thrusted upon me. I tell people I had never been more prepared for anything than I was for the sacrificial death of my mother. I wasn't prepared for the death of my father, but my mother had prepared us for her death, because the way we reacted when my mom died, my mother would be coming into the restaurant, and me and my sister Diana would be having lunch, and she would sit down and she would say, on the day that I die, I don't want anybody crying. I want people rejoicing my life. I want them celebrating my life. Not knowing how she was going to die, she would say this. And so we would say, okay, Mom, we get it. Well, now looking back, she didn't want us to react. She didn't want me to react to her death the way I reacted to my father's death. So she was preparing me for her death, not even realizing how she was going to die. So when she was killed in this heinous crime, I was prepared for it, and I honored what she wanted. She wanted everybody to celebrate her life. She died during Fiesta, April 24th, when everybody was celebrating. So that God gave her the desires of her heart, and everybody was joyful when she died, and I focused on the love. I didn't focus on the loss. With the death of my father, I focused on the loss. It almost destroyed me. With the death of my mother, I focused on the love. And I started a foundation, the Viola's Huge Heart Foundation. Within 24 hours of her death, I was praying in the morning. The day after my my mother was killed. I was only sleeping 2 hours a night during that time, and I wake up and I'm praying. I'm asking God. I said, as much as I don't want people to know that my mother, Viola Barrios, was murdered, that her body was in the medical examiner's office, the morgue, which was just like, Viola? I mean, my mom never even said one profanity in my entire life. She was a complete saint, and not everybody knew her, so they're going to think, Viola, this person was murdered. They're going to think, what kind of life did she live that she had this kind of death? And so, but nonetheless, that's what God decided for her. So my reaction put a different spotlight on how she raised us. And so the spotlight wasn't on how she died, it was how we reacted to her death and how we forgave. And when I was praying that morning, I said, Lord, I need a charity, because not everybody's going to give flowers. And so he put in my heart to start Viola's Huge Heart Foundation. And that afternoon, the Secretary of State, Roger Williams, who's a friend of mine, he's now a congressman, called me up and said, Louis, I'm very sorry about the death of your mother. I just heard about it. Is there anything I can do for you? I said, well, I'm going to start a 501c3 in her memory. He said, well, give me your attorney's phone number and her name, and I will call her. And that very next day, it was already a 501c3 when I met with my cousin Lionel Sosa, the advertising guru, to have him help me with the mission statement and things of the foundation. I said, Leonel, it's a 501c3. He said, no, Louis, it's going to be. I said, no, Leonel, it is one. Roger Williams, it's 24 hours after her death. It's already a 501c3. And he's like, wow, I've never seen anything like this. It was, there was so many divine acts that happened as a result of in the book of Job, it says that God can do all things and no purpose of his can be thwarted. So whenever it's God's will to do something, it's going to get done. Just like Los Barrios coming on all these shows, this little $3,000 seed that my mother started on all these national and international shows, it's because God said so. And you see that in other lines of business. Whenever you see these musical stars all of a sudden have these huge hits, it's because God said so. When you see these third world pitchers all of a sudden in the big leagues making $100 million, it's because God said so. There's some things that he just says it's going to be, and it's going to be. And so Los Barrios being something special, and my mother's supernatural death, and the foundation that now helps foster children and scholarships, and we do a lot of work with Adult and Teen Challenge that helps these youth that are trying to get off meth or heroin or cocaine or whatever, and they have this wonderful success rate in Christ. It's a Christian-based ministry. Then that's where we raise money to support these different efforts. Yeah. And so that all happened in real time. Within the next day that my mom's murdered, the Lord gives me the idea, gives me the name, the Viola's Huge Heart Foundation. The next day it's a 501c3, and then all of a sudden we're doing the work that God puts in our hearts to do, and it's to help people that have great need.
Absolutely. Wow. Oh, how do we follow up with that? That's amazing. I'm sorry for the loss of your mother in such a tragic way, but the act of forgiveness is such a big, I think, one of the most difficult things you can do, especially after something so kind of deplorable. And to do it so quickly, I think that's a true testament of just the family in general and just the drive you guys have towards goodness.
Well, I found something harder than forgiveness, because forgiveness is not really difficult. It's a decision. It's not an emotion. You just decide to do it. It's as easy as, picking up your hands, lowering your hands. In the book of Job, God restored the fortunes of Job when he prayed for his friends, that after he lost his wealth and lost his children and got very sick for a year, not only did he have to forgive his friends, but then he had to pray for his friends. I have learned that forgiveness, it's just an act of the will. But then to pray for somebody that's hurt you, that one has been more difficult for me. But that's what I've been practicing more and more. Yeah. Whenever whenever I've learned through my studies of the Bible that whenever somebody has, let's say you have a great need to, you need more income, so you have to sell a home. You hear of somebody else that is also great need, and they have to also sell a home. Well, you pray for them to sell a home so that they can be financially uplifted, and the Almighty will answer your prayer to help them, but He'll answer your prayer first. And so there is a discipline in prayer, and there is a benefit. It's a matter of, we're all going through this journey called life, and we were talking about this before we started the podcast. I'm 64 years old, and Tolstoy used to say the biggest surprise in a person's life is old age. And it's true. When I was in my 20s, I felt like I was old and mature and a real, adult, a grown-up. And now that I'm 64, I feel like I'm a kid. Everything's backwards, And so that's the way life is. It's got so many surprises, but at the end of the day, there's a saying I like to say is be kind to everyone, for everyone's going through their own struggle.
Yeah.
And so, forgiving one another for the mistakes we've made, some on purpose, and then praying for them. Like Jesus said, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing. Most people, they don't realize that they're hurting themselves whenever they do something that's, holding a grudge or whatever the case may be. It really doesn't benefit. It hurts them more than it helps. It hurts them more than it hurts others. And so, I think the message of my mother is just to well, let's put it this way. I would be ministering to somebody at a table with my Bible before, you had a Bible app and you could have it on your phone. And my mother would walk up and she would say, you were fed physically and you were fed spiritually. We can't do more than that. Yeah. And so my mother always liked to feed people physically and spiritually, and so that they could get their physical nourishment and their spiritual nourishment, so they can live a fulfilled life and
Absolutely.
Not a life that is just empty or just with despair. Because God gave us a life, and sometimes we wish He'd have given us somebody else's life. We see maybe Patrick Mahomes or Taylor Swift, and we think, man, what a cool life that they had. I wish I was more like that. I'm just an ordinary person, but God chose us to give us the life He gave us. And we don't have to be like St. Paul or Moses or whoever you think is your best spiritual person in the history of the world. You just have to be the best you. Absolutely. I just have to be the best Louis. I don't have to be the best Moses. Moses, he had different gifts and he had a different calling. Me, I just have to be Louis. I just have to be Louis, the restaurant guy, Louis, the person that comes and tells a story about my family, and hopefully it'll edify somebody and redirect them if they're going the wrong way, the same way I was redirected when I was going the wrong way.
Absolutely. Talking about redirection, y'all had survived COVID. Not a lot of restaurants did. How did y'all make it through that difficult time? How did you guys keep the business open during the shutdown that was months long?
Well, my mother has 8 grandchildren, and I always told them, I said, one day I woke up and my father died. One day I woke up and my mother died. I said, if one day I wake up and the businesses are gone, we're not jumping out of any buildings. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Well, one day I woke up and COVID was here, and the 4 restaurants, they had no revenues, but we had the bills continue to come in.
Right.
So within the first 2 weeks, I had to borrow $300,000 on our lines of credit with no revenues coming in to pay bills. Then we got our first triple P loan, and then I had to borrow $400,000 on the lines of credit. And then we got our second triple P loan, and then we started the process of 25% occupancy, 50% occupancy, 75% occupancy, 50% occupancy, 100% occupancy, and we started that. And so there's been several times when we had the road construction project in front of Los Barrios for 7 years. Well, it was multi-phases, so it was really in front of Los Barrios for a year. But from Jackson Killer to Hildebrand, it was like 7 stages. Our business was so disrupted. And I used to tell my servers, because sometimes we'd have 4 tables during lunch, and we had 4 servers there splitting 4 tables. And they had this shocked look in their eye like, am I going to lose my house? Am I going to lose my car? Am I going to, how am I going to survive this road construction project? And I would tell them, we have a saying in Spanish, ¿En cuál cabeza cabe eso? And whose head does that fit? It's not to be used in this context, but it can be used in this context. I said, you mean to tell me that we have survived the death of my father, my mother working as hard as she did, we've survived embezzlement, we've survived break-ins, robberies, we've survived the death of my mother, and you're going to tell me that a road construction project that's an investment from the city that's meant to be a blessing to cause a renaissance to this area is going to put Los Barrios out of business? It may happen. It just doesn't fit in my... I'll be the most surprised person on the planet if that happens. And so it's happened to me before several times. When my dad died, we lost 95% of our income, and we lost our father. My mother was widowed. When the road construction hit, we had 7 years of road construction in front of Los Barrios, followed by 3 years of road construction in front of La Hacienda, followed by 2 years of COVID, followed by 2 100-day, 100-degree summers. So it's not just COVID. It's been a lot of disruption.
Yeah.
And so, you just place one foot in front of the other. Let me tell you another story. So my mother was about to be inducted into the Hall of Honor with the Texas Restaurant Association in June. She dies in April, and she's 12 days away from going into her new home that we were building for her next to my sister in Inwood. So she got to boast about getting a new home, even though she never went to the home in Inwood. She went to a home in heaven. And she never got inducted into the Texas Restaurant Association Hall of Honor. She did posthumously, but not while she was alive. But she got inducted into another Hall of Honor. But I get to the restaurant one day, and my mother says, son, I can't sleep at night. I have insomnia. I said, Mom, you work 7 days a week till midnight. What do you mean you can't sleep? What could possibly be bothering you? She said, well, I have to get inducted into the Hall of Honor, and I'm going to have to say a speech. I said, yes. Well, I start thinking about what I'm going to say in my speech, and I can't sleep. I said, Mom, everything you've been through in life in a speech keeps you awake? I said, do me a favor. Why don't you just write about the journey? Don't thank everybody knows there. I mean, it's the Pappas family and the Cortez family and the Haslacher family and all these statewide restaurant companies. They know you didn't do it alone. It's the restaurant business. Just talk about the journey. She says, son, that's a great idea. Go ahead and write it. So it took me 5 minutes to write the speech. And it went like this. I said, this journey began September 2nd, 1975, the day after my husband Jose died. My children were young then, much younger than their ages represented. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew I had to do something. So I placed one foot in front of the other, and today I find myself here before this distinguished audience of my peers. And if I'm to be judged by anyone besides God, let it be of you, people that know the challenges, the sacrifices into the life and the life. And to you I give the thanks, but to God I give the glory. I said, that's it, Mom. I mean, you just place one foot in front of the other. No matter what happened, no matter what stumbling block was in front of you, you just kept on placing one foot in front of the other until you're here. So I tell everybody the same thing. Listen, just place one foot in front of the other. Helen Keller, Winston Churchill, what was his famous speech? Never, 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 never give up, right? 6 words. Helen Keller said, the only time that you fail is when you give up. So just keep going. Every day is going to be something different. And it may be good, it may be bad, but it doesn't matter. I mean, that's why you shouldn't get caught up. David Brooks has a book called The Road to Character, and he says that most people just focus on their resume virtues. not on their eulogy virtues. I call it the back of the back of a resume. So if you look at somebody's front of the resume, it has all their accomplishments and their attaboys and their references. You turn it over and it's blank. Well, it's not really blank, you just don't write about it. See, the front of my resume says my degree and Small Business Leader of the Year and Restaurateur of the Year and all these accomplishments. The back of my resume says former alcoholic, former drug user, etc. We all have a back of the resume, but most people don't focus on it. Now, when I used to, after I kind of, my life was given back to me, I used to go speak a lot of different places. I still do. And my mother used to say, son, I know you went through a lot of tough times, but why do you have to tell people all these things? I said, well, Mom, the recipe is called identity and hope. People identify with my fallen nature. They identify with the back of my resume. They don't identify with the front of my resume. They'll say, well, Louis is one of the lucky ones, or, you know, he inherited a lot of money, or he had a great mom, or he had a great dad, or, you know, his cousin is Lionel Sosa, or, you know, he had all the good breaks. So people identify with the back, and then they can hope based on the front. So it's identity and hope, Mom. I said, if I don't talk about the back of my resume, then the front of my resume will never resonate with people. And so I tell everybody, you know, don't worry about the back of your resume unless you want to continue going down that road. Right. Because then that will destroy you. But if you're willing to say, hey, I'm going to stop, I'm going to turn around, I'm not going to be held handcuffed by the back of my resume, and I'm going to try to build the front of my resume, but not with, I'm going to become as rich as Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos, but rather I'm going to work on my eulogy virtues by starting a Viola Barrios Foundation and helping foster children and helping youth that are addicted to drugs, or I'm going to help scholarships for people that have great need but great character. Now all of a sudden you're living for something that's bigger than yourself. And then all of a sudden you're not such a big deal in your life. It's not all about me, me, me. You wake up with the gimmies and you go to bed with the I wants. It's more like, how can I give? How can I help? And I think it was, who was the famous author said that if you help enough people get what they want, you will get what you want. Absolutely. Love it. Love it. And one thing I think is one of the biggest things that y'all have done was the puffy tacos for the White House for President Obama. How was that? Like, how did that happen? And also, that must have been a really cool way to kind of represent Los Barrios and the family, but also San Antonio. So kind of tell us a little bit about that. That sounds like it's a big venture, because it was, what, 1,500 puffy tacos? Yeah, well, I mean, that's a lot. The story starts a lot earlier than that. In 1995, I get Small Business Leader of the Year with the Greater Chamber. And Bruce Cates, which was a good customer of Los Barrios, he was like the program director at Channel 4 News, called me up and said, hey, Louis, I want to put you on TV. I said, what do you want me to do? He said, I want you to do cooking demonstrations once or twice a month. I said, nah, I don't want to do it. He goes, it's free TV. I said, no, but my little sister Diana will do it. And he said, well, should we ask her? I said, Bruce, you're not listening. I didn't say my older sister, Teresa. I said, my little sister, what time do you want her there and when? So for the next 7 years, Diana got up at 4 in the morning every 2 weeks, and she was live at 6:30 to 7 a.m. Doing cooking demonstrations on Channel 4. And my mother said, if you're going to go cook, you're not just going to cook a little bit. You're going to cook for the whole crew. They're not going to see this food and not get to eat it. Right. So Diana would have to cook food for 20 people, show up and do a cooking demonstration, and she did it for 7 years. Now she's been on Channel 4 for 33 years now doing the living show. But she practiced at being on TV, and Bruce said initially she would speak 50% of the time and the reporter or the anchor would speak 50. Well, eventually Diana got up to 80% and they got to play the color role, the reporter, and they only did 20%. So Diana got better and better. Meanwhile, all of a sudden, Emeril Lagasse is going to come to San Antonio on Good Morning America. Nice. And the Good Morning America people want to bring Emeril and a chef friend, And the Convention and Business Bureau said, why don't you use one of our local people here? And they said, who? Well, Diana Barrios Trevino. And so Diana got to cook with Emerald
Nice.
on Good Morning America. And she was 5 months pregnant on 2 hours sleep. Emerald was on 0 hours sleep. Good Morning America said it was the best segment they'd ever had with Emerald. And that's when Random House spotted Diana and contracted her and us to do a cooking cookbook, which is an all-time bestseller now. It's in its 9th printing.
Nice.
And over 70,000 books sold. And so it all started because I got a call from Bruce, and then so Emerald wrote. He said he tried the puppy taco, and he said, "Wow, I wish I would have invented this." And then we ended up coming out on a couple of Bobby Flay shows. The first one was Food Nation, and he fell in love with the puppy taco. And then he started doing a show called Throwdown with Bobby Flay.
Yes.
And then he came and challenged Diana to a throwdown on the puppy taco, which we won because it was the first segment or the first episode that Bobby's opposition, my mother left our cooking team to go help his cooking team because they were spiraling down. And so in the show it was like, you're doing bad when Mrs. Barrios has got to come help you from failing in this show. And so that's when the Obama White House spotted Diana, and they invited her to come to the congressional picnic, and they brought in a lot of different restaurateurs to cook at the congressional picnic, 1,500 puppy tacos.
Wow.
And so the story started when I got Small Business Leader of the Year, and Bruce Cates called me, and so it just, one thing came after another until Diana's on Good Morning America doing the puppy taco. She's on the Throwdown with Bobby Flay. She's cooking at the White House, all because I didn't want to come out on TV cooking.
Okay, so tell us about the future of the restaurants. Are y'all planning on opening more? We're personally fans of Viola's because that's one that's closest to us. And we love that it's a family restaurant. It has a playground there. We love the vibe. It's a good sized restaurant. It's got some massive space there. But what's the future? Kind of tell us, what are y'all looking forward to?
Well, like I tell people, we expanded with our La Hacienda Scenic Loop, and then we had to contract. It never recovered from the pandemic. And so I tell everybody, I place one foot in front of the other, and I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. None of us do. And so are we going to have other restaurants? Maybe. My mother had 8 grandchildren. 3 of them are in the family business. Diana's son Jordan is a manager at Los Barrios. My daughter Lindsay is the general manager at Viola's Ventanas. My son Ian is a manager and a server and a bartender at Viola's Ventanas. So are they going to be the next generation, the next step up the ladder of success there? We'll see. Time will tell.
Right.
I don't know right now. I don't have plans for another restaurant right now, but it doesn't mean that I've closed the door to it as well. So, time will tell.
Yeah, so besides the puffy tacos, what's the most requested, I can't even say that, requested dish at the restaurants?
Okay, well, I'm gonna have to pull something up. So
okay.
And maybe I'll give this graphic to you as well, so you can put up. But Billy Gibbons from ZZ Top came to Los Barrios.
Nice.
And he fell in love with our mole, and so he had me do a whole bunch of homework for him because he loves the Latino culture and the Spanish language. So he had me look up dichos for him, and he had me send my father's recording of him to his email, because the recording that I played for you of my father as a broadcaster, I played it for Billy, and he's like, send me that right now. He loves the Latino culture. And so in the article the Express News wrote, I said, he's going to be a repeat customer. And so I sent it to him, and here's what he said. He said, "Sí, señor. We are now confirmed return customers. Compliments to you and the Barrios crew. The cuisine is simply stellar. Más mole, más mole. Ten cuidado, amigo. Hasta luego. Billy F. Gibbons." So
wow.
the mole. So we have a Tex-Mex from San Antonio, and my mother was from Bustamante, Nuevo León, outside of Monterrey.
Yeah.
And so that's northern Mexico. So we have enchiladas mexicanas with the chile ancho. We have the mole. We have the churrasco steak with the chimichurri sauce, and then we have the Tex-Mex, the recipes we got from El Rancho that my mother modified. So those are our two influences. So some Mexican nationals come for the mole, and some people like Billy come for the mole, and then some people come from the Tex-Mex or the puffy taco, which is also Tex-Mex. And that's food that is familiar to San Antonio, keeping in mind that San Antonio used to be part of Mexico.
Yeah.
So they say Tex-Mex, but you could say Mex-Tex too, because this was Mexico before it was the United States. So it's not Texan, it's not American Mexican food, it's Mexican food prepared in Texas, but before it was even part of the United States. I mean, this is part of our history that they would use ingredients that were relative to that part of the region.
Nice.
Yes.
Now, we're getting close to the end, but I have a question as well for future restaurant owners and those who want to open up their own restaurant. What is the biggest piece of advice that you could give them?
Well, the biggest advice, and I have people tell me all the time, they say, I want to open up a restaurant and this and that. I said, sure, great. I said, have you ever worked in a restaurant? Yes or no? And if it's no, I say, okay, well, come work at a restaurant. And, you got to work there for about a good 6 months and learn that it's a lifestyle. And if it's the lifestyle that you like, then, hey, go for it. Now, there's only one person I've ever encouraged to go into the restaurant business, and that's Doug and Lori Karski from Doe. I don't know if you're familiar with that restaurant.
Love Doe.
Okay, so Doug and Lori came to me. Lori was doing our advertising down at the whenever they had the conventions. She would set up a booth, and she represented restaurants. She represented us, and so they came to me to ask me for advice because Doug had, he was a chef, worked in restaurants before, and he had this idea for this wonderful oven from Italy to make pizzas, and they wanted to get my take on it. It was the only persons I've ever encouraged to get into the restaurant business. One, because Doug already knew the life. Two, because Lori knew how to market.
Yeah.
And three, they didn't have children, so they could commit to the enterprise.
Right.
And so it was the only person I've ever encouraged to get in the restaurant business, and needless to say, hey,
they're
I was
successful.
right. I'd like to say I was right, but it was easy to spot them. But I encourage them. But I usually discourage people from getting in the restaurant business because it's a lifestyle business. Now, I happen to love the lifestyle, but if you don't, then be nice to yourself, and
you'll get burnt out.
Yeah, it's very hard. It's very hard.
Now, being in the food industry, you obviously do love your restaurants and the food y'all serve. But what are some of your other favorite restaurants in San Antonio to go to visit and frequent?
Whoever has good salmon.
Oh, nice.
I'm a big salmon guy.
Well, what place has good salmon?
Well, Fleming's has good salmon.
Okay.
Let's see. Eddie V's has good salmon. Let's see who else has got good salmon. Ruth Chris has got good salmon. And so, whenever my family doesn't eat Mexican food, or whenever we go out, it's usually Italian or steaks and seafood.
Yeah.
Or rarely Chinese, but it's not very, I don't get that many days off, and so it's usually that, or breakfast. I like good breakfast places, like Jim's.
I love breakfast. So when y'all do have Mexican food or Tex-Mex or all of that, do y'all go to y'all's restaurants, or do you sometimes sneak out and go to someplace else?
I don't go to other Mexican restaurants in San Antonio, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Whenever I go to Paisanos or whatever restaurant I go to, and our customers see me, they'll make a beeline to me and they'll say, "You're supposed to be eating enchiladas. What are you doing here? I'm going to tell your sister. I hope you're happy with yourself." That's how they respond. That's how they react. If they see me in another Mexican restaurant, they feel like they're betraying me, that they're not eating at Los Barrios. And I don't like to put our customers in that position, so I rarely go to other Mexican restaurants unless I have to go to a meeting, because if our customers see me, I don't want them to feel embarrassed. They can go wherever they want to. And a lot of our customers we share with other Mexican restaurants. Jacalas, for years, it was a restaurant that burned down. Lucio Hooker, dear friend of ours, She was the owner. She was friends of my mother, and she's friends with my sister, and she's friends with me. And we buried her last year. But we shared customers. They would come to Jacala's and Los Barrios and Jacala. And so when Jacala's burned down, they're just our customers now. But we share customers with Mi Tierra.
Yeah.
We share customers with, we shared them with Jacala. We share them with a lot of restaurants. So the customer can go wherever they want to, and it doesn't hurt my feelings where they go to. But I don't want them to feel uncomfortable because they see me at another Mexican restaurant and they feel they're betraying me. They're not betraying me.
Yeah, no, of course. Well, you could also say, like, hey, I'm also here to get inspiration sometimes. You never know. You know, what is it, covert ops? Is that what they call it? Or you just go disguised.
Yeah.
You know?
Yes.
So, I did tell you that we have a tradition on this podcast.
Yes.
Where the previous guest that was on the podcast, they don't know who the next guest is.
Yes.
So they get to ask whatever random question.
Okay.
So last month, the question was, if you were an ice cream flavor, which ice cream flavor would you choose, and how does it describe you, and why? He's like, on the spot.
Because, you know, I just eat vanilla and chocolate, right? It's a classic. It's plain and simple, and I guess it speaks to me. You know, either the window's all the way up or all the way down. Either we're vanilla or we're chocolate. So make up your mind. You know, it's not. I'm not one of those guys that I can eat the same thing every day. It's okay with me. You know, I'll eat the same thing every day until I switch to something else. Then I'll eat that every day. Until I switch to something else, then I'll eat that every day.
It's like phases.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm not. My mother was a great cook, and my wife has turned into my mother. She's a great cook now. And my dad, was Spanish radio, TV, and newspaper. My mother was a great cook. And so he got invited to dinners all the time, and they would go, but my dad never ate at those dinners. And they say, hey, Pop, how come you're not going to eat at those dinners? He goes, I like Viola's cooking. I don't know if I'm going to like that chef's cooking. I'm going to eat Viola's cooking. I'm not going to risk. He never would eat out. And so I have become my father. I like my mother's cooking, my sister's cooking, and my wife's cooking.
You're set.
And so I don't know if I'm going to like somebody else's cooking. So it's pretty simple with me, you know. I mean, if you like it, like Croce says, if you dig it, do it. And if you really dig it, do it twice.
Yeah. You got it all figured out, and you're truly blessed. So can you let me and Gabriel know the next question that you have for the next guest for next month? Okay.
So San Antonio's my home. I love San Antonio. I was talking to Robert Ory, the former Spur, and he said, Louis, the teams that I won with, the different championships, I love seeing those guys. And the teams that I lost with, I don't like to see them. Yeah. He goes, even though we won in San Antonio, there's something about San Antonio that's very special. I said, Robert, San Antonio was a small town, mid-sized city that grew to be a big city, but nobody told us. Not that we're not sophisticated, but that we're still everybody's friends.
Small town.
I meet you and Gabriel, and immediately I feel like we're family. It just feels that way. It's just San Antonio, and so even though we're now a big city, it doesn't feel like it to me. It didn't feel like it to Robert. Everybody knows everybody. It's 3 degrees from somebody.
Yep.
So that's why I think San Antonio is special. So your next guest, I would like to ask them, why do you think San Antonio is so special?
Oh, way to twist it. Hold on, let me write that down because I don't want to forget. Oh, not why do you think?
Why do you think San Antonio is so special?
Antonio is so special.
I mean, we're not the biggest, we're not the smartest, we're not the richest. We got a real good heart.
We do.
And we like to embrace people. And in order to embrace somebody, you got to get vulnerable. You got to put your guard down. And sometimes somebody's going to be mean to you. But hey, you know what? You'll never hit a home run unless you risk striking out.
Yeah, there's that quote. I graduated high school, and I had a graduation party, and I had this shoebox, and people got to put words of advice for me for life after high school. And my cousin Michelle, I always stuck to that quote, and it just stuck with me. But it was never let the fear of striking out keep you from playing the game. I
There you go.
always love that quote.
There you go.
So you saying something like that, it kind of resonated with me. So we do have a few questions
Okay.
from people who are watching. What's something you don't like about San Antonio? Can you raise the first question?
Well, the traffic is getting, harder and harder and harder.
Yeah.
And we're doing our best to
Accommodate for the growth,
it.
yeah.
In the next 20 years, we're going to have 1 million people move to our city, mostly north of 1604, right where you're at,
Yeah.
as a matter of fact, all the way to where Hacienda's at. And so people bring their purchasing power, but they don't bring their roadways, they don't bring their electricity, they don't bring their water. And I'm very concerned about, sometimes you have this growth that you're not ready for. For example, David Robbins said that he grew a foot over a summer. A foot.
Wow.
And that's why he got close to 7 feet tall, and sometimes you're not prepared for that, or no matter how hard you plan, like Mike Tyson used to say, hey, you're going to fight against this boxer, your opponent. And he said he's got a plan. He says, everybody's got a plan until I hit him. And then all of a sudden. And so my concern, it's not what I don't like, is my concern is, are we going to be ready when these 1 million people get here? We do have a lot of land so we can sprawl. Like, obviously, this area, a part of town, has grown.
Absolutely.
Just this has been the biggest growth in the state of Texas, 78251, where Viola was at and where you're at here. And so, thank God for Marty Wender, who got those 2 roadways, 151 and 1604, finished off.
Yeah.
Just to land SeaWorld, get the Hyatt Hill Country, and that started the growth in this part of the town, not affecting the aquifer. But that is my area of concern. Are we going to be ready for this kind of growth? And ready or not, here I come.
Yep. Exactly.
So it's not what I don't like, it's my concern.
Yeah, I understand. Now, last question. What advice would you share with someone who's about to move to San Antonio?
Well, for men or for women, because it's different. See, I have noticed in the restaurant business that women are very good at building community. Men are not good at building community. And so women, one Saturday night at La Hacienda, there was 12 different groups of women that were celebrating birthdays, but it was actually just one of those women's birthdays. So women are very good at building community. We're going to get together with this set of girlfriends for my birthday, and we're going to get together with this set of women with for my birthday, and we're going to get together with this club to do this, or this is our book club. And I see, but you don't see that with men. Men are not good at building community. So if you're a man, you need to be able to engage into, whether it's chamber or church or whatever kind of group, put yourself out there and start meeting people. San Antonio is very embracing.
Yes.
So now women, man, you know what? Just get out of their way. They already know what they're going to do. Nobody's going to tell a woman what to do. She knows what she's going to do. It's Charlie Rangel, the congressman from New York. He's retired, but he was the one credited with convincing Hillary Clinton to run for the Senate seat, and we're talking 20 or 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And he was on a Sunday talk show, and they asked him, they said, Congressman Rangel, we understand that you are the person that convinced Hillary to run for the Senate seat in New York. He said, well, it was like when I got engaged with my wife. Yes, I was there, and yes, the words came out of my mouth, but it was her idea.
Yeah.
So just get out of women's way, and they're going to be fine. Just don't be a stumbling block. And for men, hey, put yourself out there. You'll meet some good people.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Louis, so much for taking the time out of your busy day, because we know you work a lot, to come here, take the time to be on our podcast. Gabriel and I are immensely, immensely grateful. Usually, I also have another tradition. I usually give a painting, but I've been incredibly busy and I haven't had time. So I owe you a painting, because I do different ones with like crayon wax and fluid art. So I owe you a painting.
Well, if I could be so bold as to request the Viola's Huge Heart Foundation, my mother's heart, if you get inspired,
Okay.
and you think about my mother's story and how she sacrificed her life so we could have a life, and so that others could have a more fulfilled life.
Yeah.
If you're inspired sometime and want to do something to do with my mother's beautiful heart, Viola's beautiful heart, Viola's huge heart, then I would love to get something like that.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess it kind of worked out, didn't it? That I didn't have one prepared. Oh, that would be wonderful.
Yeah.
I'll put some energy into that. Thank you so much, and I'll look into it.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you again for coming. Like I said, Gabriel and I are super happy. So one more time, please tell the YouTube world and all the listeners, all the restaurants you have, the locations, how can they get in touch with you if they have any questions, and just take it away. It's your last time to shine right now.
Well, Los Barrios is 45 years old. It's on Blanco Road, south of Bassi. La Hacienda de Los Barrios is on Redland Road between 1604 and 281. Viola's Ventanas is close to SeaWorld on Westover Hills Boulevard. And we're a family restaurant that caters to families. And so our mission statement is, come join the fun and become one of the family. And so I'm reachable. You can come to my restaurants. My managers give out my number to everybody, 210-771-7014. They ask me, Louis, is it okay if I give out your number? I said, well, not only give out my number, I'm going to go to every tattoo parlor in the city and have my number up there so people can tattoo their arm on my deal, because most of the time when I connect with people, it's because, maybe they need my help, or maybe they need encouragement, or maybe they need some advice, or maybe they just need to connect with somebody that I know, or who knows what. Maybe it's a plate of mole, maybe it's, what are your specials, or whatever. So, I mean, I'm open, I'm vulnerable with my customers, and people are welcome to call me or welcome to come to the restaurants. I always consider it an honor to meet people and get to embrace them.
Well, thank you so much, Louis. Louis or Louis? Does it matter?
Well, either one. My name is Luis. Louis. My dad used to call me Louis. King Louis, Sweet Louis, Saint Louis, Captain Lou. I've heard it all. Yeah.
Well, thank you again. Thank you. I'm so happy that you were our first part of the restaurant industry to be on this podcast. So thank you. And thank y'all for watching. If you haven't already, please subscribe, hit the bell notification button. Y'all know exactly how it is, because we want y'all to come back, and we just want this whole algorithm to work for us. So thank you guys for watching. We can't wait till the next one. It's almost 2025. So like I said, Gabriel and I are San Antonio's realtor couple, and we have big goals for 2025 for our business. So we want to start expanding our team and just kind of start becoming real estate moguls in San Antonio. So we would love for you, if you support that by watching our channel, or if you're looking to buy, sell, or invest in San Antonio, we are here to help you with that. You or anybody you know. So thank you guys for watching. I'm Christina Zachary, and we will see you guys later, and have a wonderful day.